All right, good morning. Welcome to Legislative Post-Audit. We'll go ahead and bring this meeting to order. Would like to welcome everyone and remind everyone that we are live streamed. Remind our members that you do need to turn on and use your mics during the meeting. Remind that we also need to turn in our travel vouchers, so please do that. We're going to begin today with the K-12 IT Security Survey Audit, and I'd like to recognize Heidi to go over that with us. Welcome, Heidi.
Thank you. Good morning. So this is the limited scope K-12 IT Security Audit. It is a one-question audit. What do school districts report regarding IT security standards and resources? I'll give you the very, very brief answer first and then go through a little background and then get into the details of the audit answer. So the brief answer to the question, though, is that many school districts have not implemented basic IT security controls. So a little background first. School districts maintain a variety of sensitive data on students, and this includes some of the obvious things like student grades and disciplinary actions, but they also maintain information such as medical and mental health records and financial information. But school districts also face many threats that could result in an unauthorized person accessing that confidential data. That can include things like a data breach that involves disclosure of sensitive or protected data, either accidentally or intentionally, or something like a phishing scam, which involves using email to trick a recipient into revealing confidential information or into providing access to the network. And these kinds of attacks on school districts have increased in recent years. In March of 2021, the K-12 Cybersecurity Resource Center reported an 18% increase in IT security incidences in school districts over the previous year. However, properly implemented security controls can make it less likely that someone will gain access to confidential data. And there are state and federal laws that restrict access to that data, but those laws do not require any specific security controls to be taken. So for example, the Federal Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, which is also known as FERPA, requires written permission from a guardian to release information in a student's educational record. The Kansas Student Data Privacy Act also restricts who districts and the Department of Education can release student data to. But again, neither of these laws require districts to implement any specific IT controls. There are also state laws that require state agencies to adopt certain IT security controls, but those laws do not apply to school districts. And further, KSDE does not require districts to implement specific IT security controls. So we have an environment here where districts have lots of requirements to protect data, but no requirements for how they should protect that data. So the answer, though, to the audit question begins on page 3. So we sent surveys to all 286 school districts and the Kansas Schools for the Deaf and the Blind, and we asked districts to report on the practices their districts have currently implemented across several IT security areas. 51% responded. Given that high response rate, we think that the results are reasonably representative of districts statewide, but we do want to note that returning the survey was voluntary, and that can introduce some self-selection bias into the results. So as I just mentioned, districts are not required to implement anything specific, but there are a number of basic controls that are good practices. And we asked districts about some of those good basic controls. What we found, though, was that the majority of school districts reported lacking many of those basic IT security controls. The figure on page 4 shows some of the details of some of the questions that we asked the districts. But here's a few examples of what we found. So 58% do not require security awareness training for their staff at any time. Standards suggest that staff should attend security awareness training when you're hired, and then again annually. 59% of districts do not require confidential data to be encrypted when they send it outside their network. All confidential data should be encrypted every time it leaves the district's network. 65% do not scan their computer systems for vulnerabilities as often as they should. That included 35% of districts that reported never scanning their computer network. And standards suggest that organizations should scan their networks at least monthly. We also found that smaller school districts, so districts with about 500 kids or less, they lagged behind large districts in implementing a number of security controls. And a large district, for our purposes, is a district that has more than 3,000 students. So we found that 67% of small districts reported having antivirus on all of the district's computers, but 80% of large districts did. We also noted that 33% of small districts reported scanning computers at least monthly, but in comparison, 55% of large districts did so. We also asked districts to rate the significance of various barriers to implementing adequate IT security controls in their district. And figure 2, which is on the bottom of page 5, it shows the details of what we found. And as you can see in that figure, staff-related issues were the most significant barriers. So about half of the districts reported that their ability to hire sufficient IT staff or to pay them competitively were significant barriers. Districts reported a few other things to us as well. Several reported that the lack of guidance from the state was problematic, and a few reported that it's difficult to get staff to implement security practices because many of them are viewed as inconvenient. We also interviewed several stakeholders, including the Department of Education, a service center, and a private company that provide IT services to districts as well as to a number of school districts. And every person that we talked to told us that a lack of knowledge or training was a challenge that they faced. Most of them told us that guidance from the state would be helpful, but a few told us that they thought that imposing requirements would potentially be met with some resistance. We also asked districts to estimate their IT security expenditures. On average, districts reported spending about $18 per student. In comparison, districts spent on average about $16,000 total per student. We also looked for national benchmarks for IT security expenditures in school districts, but we didn't find anything. So as a result, we cannot say whether the expenditures the districts reported are reasonable or appropriate or not. Our last finding is on page 7. We did identify a few states that require school districts to implement specific IT security controls. Due to time constraints, though, we could not do a comprehensive search across all states, but we did identify a few. So first, New Hampshire and New York both require their departments of education to establish minimum standards for the security of student data. We also found that in Texas, Texas requires its school districts to adopt a cybersecurity policy and requires every district to designate a cybersecurity coordinator as well. We did have one recommendation from this audit. That recommendation is also on page 7. It's that the Kansas Legislature should consider directing the Department of Education to establish a set of minimum IT security standards for school districts in the form of either guidance or requirements. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Heidi. Committee members, what questions do you have? Representative Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to compliment the post-audit staff for suggesting this audit. I'd never really thought about it, but I'm glad they're thinking outside the box. And apparently, this is something we need to address. But I think the staff has done a great job in making those recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely disappointed in this. Seems to me that the state school board's not even making sure we're doing some of the basic requirements on protecting the identification of people. Can't believe in this day and age that we're this far behind. It's going to take 2 or 3 years just to, if they get started, to get up to par. I mean, you could have an ex-employee still have keys to the building, and with these students so young, they're very bright on how to use technology. They could be getting in and changing their grade. There's many things that could be happening here. I would have thought the state school board would have standards set, and I would think that we would have some kind of internal and external controls put in place that they're being audited. I'm really shocked that it's so loose that you could have an ex-employee or so many other things. You know, I think the legislature should pick this up and set some minimum standards, but you know, it's really up to state school board to pick this one up. They're over all these schools. I don't know. It's disappointing to me. And I think they would probably be able to pay for it with savings from these audits. I think they would find out that there would be quite a few savings that they would be able to help pay for this. So that's my comment.
All right, thank you, Senator. We have Representative Gardner and then Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just, point out to the senator that according to statute, they're not required. So it would seem to me if it's not required, they're not going to really do it unless we require them to do it. And, we found state agencies don't even meet the requirements. So that's something the legislature, I agree, needs to address.
Senator Olson and then Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All the important information they're housing on all the parents and the kids, this is ideal for identity theft. It just takes one little school, they can open the door, or someone that's not doing it. I just can't believe in this day and age that we don't have some better standards than this. And I think that's an excuse that we're not legislating. I most certainly think we need to, but I would think in this day and age, all the technology that's being used, they're basically doing their curriculum on a day-to-day basis. To me, this is just dangerous. I mean, we wouldn't require a bank to do this, not protect their information. We wouldn't require a lot of other, and I've been in here, we've audited a lot of other agencies. I've seen them from start to finish, and they've improved considerably. The universities, and I just can't believe we haven't really gotten started on school this late in the game. So, thank you.
Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question with regard to the recommendation. Does KD, the Department of Education, have an IT department that could direct or kind of give guidance to these schools, or would they have to establish some relationship with an outside IT department to set up a standard for these schools to follow?
We did talk to the department throughout the audit. The department does have an IT department within KSDE, but they are there for the day-to-day operations of the Department of Education. They're not there, they are not currently staffed for providing guidance and IT to school districts. Their department is for, obviously, their state agency. How the department might implement guidance, I think we do have a few people from the Department of Education here, but I do know that they have told us they are not currently staffed to provide guidance or detailed instruction to school districts.
Do we have, with our state IT department, somebody that can help guide them, or do you think they would have to go outside to find some security? I'm just trying to get an idea of, if we're going to have to spend more money to do this, or? Yeah,
I think it would depend very much on what actions exactly the legislature took in terms of what they directed the department to do, whether this is in the form of guidance or in the form of requirements. There's a lot of variation. There's a lot of ways this could go kind of based on what the legislature wanted to do, and I think that would strongly influence what the department would have to do as well.
Okay, Thank you.
Heidi, what year did this state law change that would require the individual state agencies to adopt IT security policies? Do you know what year that would be?
ITech standards, is that what you're referring to? I believe my manager's shaking her head no at me. I don't know that we have that answer right off the top of our heads, but I think that is an answer we can get you.
Okay, that would be helpful. And then segueing from that, do you know if that also encompassed, let's say, city and county and their securities? No.
The ITech standards do not cover, the ITech standards cover state agencies. I believe also boards and commissions, but the ITech standards really are for state agencies.
Okay, great. Are there any other questions for Heidi? We do have KSDE here that we can direct questions to. If there are no other, and I would just note that in your short audit, it did say that the school districts are spending on average $18 a day, but with the Gannon well, not a day.
Per student.
Per student, not a day. That would be a totally different number. But if you think about that, $18 per student, that's what they're spending. But just in the last year, because of the Gannon money, it's $286 million flatline increase that we'll spend next year. And if you take that divided by 486,000 students, that's $588 per student more. So I would hope that school districts could take on this responsibility without the Kansas legislature giving them more money than we have already allocated. Yes.
I also know that we noted in the report that school districts have received a lot of COVID money. Those funds for school districts are called ESSER funds. And the federal government allows school districts to spend their ESSER funds on certain kinds of IT security activities. They do have to be related to, in some way, COVID, but that money is out there. The Department of Education told us that they have told the school districts that they can use their money for those purposes, and that some districts have used some of their ESSER funds for IT security activities.
And we're talking about a few $1 billion that are available. So 10%, so you take a small fraction of that to use for IT security, considering that many of these school districts did buy laptops for every single student. And so those must also be secured. So that would be a great use of resources. Okay, committee, if there are no other questions for Heidi, okay. Thank you, Heidi, for your report. We appreciate it. And Representative Barker has a question for KSDE.
I do.
Okay, and who do we have here representing KSDE? If you would come to the microphone and introduce yourself. Is that John behind the mask? Oh my goodness, John Hess.
Madam Chair, John Hess, Director of Fiscal Services for the Kansas State Department of Education. I also, if this gets into very IT specific things, have Kathy Grossenbacher, our Director of Information Technology, here as well.
Thank you, and I can assure you it will not get technical because I'm not a technical person. But this is surprising. But has Kansas Department of Education not explored this possibility? You've got a think tank over there. You guys have been thinking ahead. Have you not ever thought about requiring local school districts to protect the data that they possess better than they are? I mean, have you got a planning group out there or something like that that's looked at this in the past? This is not a new subject.
Madam Chair, Representative, no, it is not. Our IT department is heavily focused on providing services to school districts in the form of, we have to maintain applications and a variety of other things that the IT department does. And we have an internal IT data governance board. I would defer to Kathy, who has been at the department a little bit longer and is more familiar with the kind of internal conversations that they've had related to that.
Kathy, if you'd like to speak to that. And when you come up and address that question, you might also address whether or not your governance requirements, your IT requirements for KSDE could be shared as an example to the school districts with no cost, no additional cost.
Madam Chair and committee, we have discussed the possibilities of providing guidance to school districts. It's been a few years since we have done that. The reason being we don't have the staff to do that. I am not opposed, I'm going to take this down, thank you. I am not opposed to providing our IT security policies to school districts. They are modeled after ITech. We do have school districts that reach out to us occasionally with questions, and I have sat down with several superintendents and their IT directors to walk through the ITech protocols and offer them some best practice guidance, but without sitting in their environment, because every environment is different. That's very difficult to do. But yes, we will gladly share what we have in place.
Representative
And
Barker.
I'll go back to either one of you. You know, the vulnerability is there. It's probably been evident to you for a long period of time. And do you need legislation, the legislature, to enact something? Could you not have done this on your own and brought it to our attention rather than wait for our post-audit staff to do an audit on it? I mean, I like initiative. I would rather for the Department of Education to come and say, you know, we've got a vulnerability here. We need to address that. And that's your, you know, that's your leadership that should be doing that, not waiting for us to catch something because our post-audit had suggested that we do an audit on this, and then we have these findings. Either one of you, if you wish to respond.
Madam Chair, Representative, it is certainly important. In part, one of the concerns from the department's perspective is exactly what to do, because providing simple guidance in the form of these are our standards, we could do easily. But if that morphs into something that is more and more intensive that requires having staff to go visit to 286 school districts or numerous private schools and stuff like that, we do not have the financial resources currently to be able to hire the staff qualified to do that type of work and also travel to school districts and work with school districts on an individual basis and stuff, and all those types of things. We have limited state general fund appropriations for internal agency operations, and we don't have the federal funds also for agency operations to hire and support that kind of staff, extensive staff work right now.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know who is the right, this is probably more of a school district question than a board question, but I'm trying to, it looks like if you look at figure 2 on page 5, that the two issues really aren't technology-based, but it's the ability to hire adequate IT staff and the ability to pay them competitively. So I'm wondering if we know at all why don't districts perceive that they can pay a competitive wage? Is that because they don't have the money? Is that because there's a salary sort of progression that doesn't reflect what folks can get in the private sector? I mean, it seems like this is like a person power issue as much as it is like a technology issue. And I don't know, you know, why are districts saying that they can't hire these people? Why are districts saying they can't pay them? Do they have the money and the salary scale is off? What's going on there?
Madam Chair, Senator, I don't think we can provide a clear answer to that. I know from internally for our hiring of IT staff, it's being able to pay a competitive salary to attract the qualified people that we want. And so I would imagine that.
Because of the state pay scale? Is that why?
The state pay scale does not dictate what you pay for your local.
Right, that's kind of my question is, I'm trying to figure out why they can't pay a competitive wage.
Madam Chair, Senator, I think that would require KSD to talk more with individual school districts. I would imagine it is highly dependent upon the circumstances of the individual school districts. So larger school districts might be in more urban and suburban communities, might be able to better attract staff compared to school districts in smaller rural school districts throughout the state. But the department would have to have more in-depth conversations with individual school districts to understand the problems that they're facing.
I just add on to that, pay does not seem to be an issue when we're looking at administrative pay for school districts. Most administrators make more than our governor, more than our secretaries for our agencies. So I think it's really decisions that are made locally on what is the priority. And with the information I just shared with you, that there's 286 million more next year for students, then if you think about that, that's $588 per child approximately. So I think that it's just, what are your priorities? And that's for those local school boards to determine. Our Constitution lays it out that they are in control of the operation of their schools. So ultimately, the responsibility does lie on them. But I am going to agree with my colleagues that this recommendation doesn't require you to send IT staff out to the school districts. It simply says to at least provide security standards, guidelines. That could have easily been implemented by providing what you already have. And I'm just kind of disappointed with the comment that we received back, the response from KSDE that says we will need to have additional IT staff without looking at the recommendation that just said guidelines. Because ultimately, it is the responsibility of each school board to fund this and to provide it. And I think that the Kansas legislature has done a tremendous job of funding K-12 education. Representative Topikar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for Auditor. You mentioned early on in this report that you looked at some other states, and you have New Hampshire, New York, and Texas. And the New Hampshire and New York, their statutes just require their Department of Education to develop these standards. And then Texas requires the school district. So my question is, are these the only states that you identified, or how many did you look at? And did these just kind of like, they were easy to find, or are there others out there too?
As we noted in the report, because this is a limited scope audit, we just had some time constraints. So we were not able to do a comprehensive search of every state. We were able to very quickly find a few. I think because New Hampshire and New York are relatively new to this. It's only been in the last couple of years that they have directed their departments to go out and set these standards and then to implement them and at least in the case of New York, kind of enforce them as well. So they're pretty new to doing this as well. So that may be why those were the first ones we found.
There may be other states out there too that we just don't know about right now.
It could be, yes.
And the thing that seems like would be practical and logical that is that the Board of Education could, the different school districts, whoever could do their own search and look. These states here, New York and New Hampshire, seem to be adopting the NIST standards. So, I mean, that's a pretty easy find there and go from that point, so.
I believe the standards may be online as well, that they have already, that those two states have put into practice. I believe those are online, so potentially publicly available to other school districts.
Thank you.
All right, committee. Yes, Representative Barker.
Just more of a question for Justin.
Sure.
Can you share with the committee the names of the school districts or the numbers of the school districts who responded to this? Because if I have some of them in my district, you know, I want to go talk to those superintendents and those local school boards. Is that possible, or?
So let us do a little consultation. I think probably the answer is yes, but not with the corresponding results. So what we promised.
I understand, but
Just
just
to
so that
respond
I
it.
can go and talk to those.
Respondents, I think, that we could provide to the committee, but let me take that back and consider, because our surveys by definition are confidential, but it doesn't limit us in how we report that. So we'll have to confer with the team to know what we promised.
Right.
It's a good suggestion.
And my last question would be to the chair, since you're also chairman of Education Budget. I would hope that this will be a priority with the Budget Committee, the Education Budget Committee.
Yeah, I think that's something definitely we're going to talk about. Ultimately, I do feel that we have fully funded our school districts and they need to take this on. However, I did talk to Justin and he said that yes, they can easily send this audit to the 286 school districts. In addition, if you could provide them a link to the NIST standards, and then in addition to that, if John and Kathy would go back to KSDE and ask them what measures are they going to do in response to this that is not reliant on more money. Just simple standards, sending links, whatever it might be. Representative Gardner.
That was exactly what my question was. For the department, I think they need to go back, they need to take a look, they need to bring the education committees a plan, either requirements or guidance, and then we can tackle it from that point. I would just also say IT would be probably tough to get the proper folks out into rural areas, but that's all about sharing. School districts could share IT folks from one school district to another, but that's beside the point. That's another problem. I just hope they come and make a presentation.
And I would also note that with all of the laptops that exist, if there are 486,000 different laptops, I bet you most of these communities have some kind of technical support within their district, whether they've trained those teachers or individuals and sent them out so that they can assist. Otherwise, they're going to be in a tough spot with all that IT today. Senator Tyson is online and she has a question. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it is to the Department of Education. They mentioned that they didn't have the resources to hire. I would ask them, do they have the resources to handle data breaches and understand that the cost that they would incur with these data breaches? Hello?
Madam Chair, Senator, I would ask a clarifying question, if I may. Is the senator speaking about data breaches at the school district level or at the Kansas State Department of Education?
Either. You would be responsible for the cost. There's notification cost incurred. There could be other cost incurred also by Kansas statute if this was to become a problem. So you're acting as if you don't have the resources available. And again, this tends to be a priority or a lack of a priority throughout the state government. And this needs to be a #1 priority for all of Kansas government, including K through 12 education.
Madam Chair, Senator, I would say that the KSDE is confident in the security of our internal systems, and we have not had a data breach, and we are confident in the ability to to protect the data that KSDE is entrusted with. And we would be able to respond, confidently respond if there was a situation at KSDE itself. As for school districts, at the school district level, I believe that would be more the response of local school districts on an individual basis if there's an issue at a school district.
Madam Chair, if I may, it's disappointing that the Kansas Department of Education did not see it upon themselves to help give the guidance and help mentor these school districts through such a critical issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Tyson. We have Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the right way moving forward, and I guess probably the biggest disappointment, I would have thought you guys would have been one of the first. And I'm sure some school districts have done an excellent job. And I'm sure some school districts probably haven't done a great job. I hope what comes out of this, you guys go back and put a team of people together and bring them recommendations back to the legislature to start at least a basic level of improving your IT systems. Make sure that all the school districts, the ones that don't have the money, that are taking it serious, making sure 80% of it can be solved with just simple, password changes and stuff like that. So I'm hoping, you guys go over there and start working on this and bring something back. I don't think it should be the legislature. I think you need to work with the school districts that are more vulnerable and find out what they need, and we resolve it together. But I've seen the colleges and the junior colleges and the four-year colleges, what the audits have done and how they've improved over the last 6 or 7 years. And I would have thought we would have had a basic, requirement of making sure the updates are made and the passwords are changed and that internal controls were put in place. So we got to get to work on this and make sure that we have this across the state, because we're leaving a lot of information vulnerable in this state. And I know there's going to be stretches in the rural areas or certain school districts to get this done. We got to figure out how to get it done. We need to start and then build off of that. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Olson. It looks like we have some not complicated suggestions that can be easily applied in a pretty straightforward manner. And I think LPA has some items that they can forward on to our school districts. And then, of course, our education committees can look at the progress since this meeting here today in January. So with that, we're going to go ahead and close discussion on the K-12 IT security survey audit, and we're going to move on to performance audit requests, the state fair offered by Representative Gardner. And I will recognize Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a refresher, per our committee rules for this committee, any audit requests made during the interim must be presented at the next regularly scheduled meeting. So Representative Gardner has expressed interest in an audit of the state fair. Just a note to you all to refresh if this sounds familiar. Actually, this audit was approved by this committee about a year ago, last September in 2020. However, it got rescinded later in the year to make room in our schedule for Senator Denning's request on the hospital tax audit. So the audit got rescinded. It got moved to the spring 2021 meeting for reconsideration. It did not get selected, but Representative Gardner has expressed an interest in reintroducing the subject. So I have attached the proposal in your packet, and I also have a copy of the current audit schedule, kind of mapping out what projects are underway, what projects are upcoming. It's our recommendation to members when you're considering this proposal that you consider not only the merit of the audit request, but compare it to the other audits already approved and on the schedule. If this request appears to be a higher priority, the committee may wish to consider approving it. If this request does not appear to be a greater priority, we recommend the committee direct staff to add it to the list to be considered in spring of 2022. Otherwise, if no action is taken, it will be removed from further consideration unless someone else resurrects it again. The attached proposal has two main questions. Does the state fair have adequate controls to ensure accounting and accurate accounting and prudent use of resources? And how does Kansas compare to other states in terms of handling funding expenditures and promotion efforts? So, Madam Chair, the committee can make a motion to either approve it today or to tell staff to move it to the spring meeting for consideration. Again, otherwise, if no action is taken, it will be removed from further consideration unless resurrected again.
All right, thank you, Chris. We'll start with questions that might be directed to Chris about our audit schedule or about the feasibility or any other questions you may have related to this proposal. And then we'll put Representative Gardner on the spot and let him maybe speak or advocate for this one way or the other. And then, of course, discussion with the group would be important before we determine if a motion, what type of motion we'd like. So questions for Chris? Yes, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Chris. How much room is there right now for additional audits, short scope audits or smaller scope audits? I'm aware of one request we may have coming down the pike that may be fairly high priority regarding some of the extraordinary gas price costs that we experienced in February last year. And it may be a time-sensitive type of an audit that we've got coming. So how much room is there for something like that on a short fuse?
If you look at the audit schedule, the graphic, the sideways graphic, the darker colored boxes are the ones that are already underway. The lighter colored blue boxes are audits that this committee has already approved that we have not yet started yet. And you can see the little tiny boxes, there's 5 of them. We currently have 5 limited scope audits in the queue that haven't been teed up yet. As far as room for another limited scope audit, probably not a problem. This request today is for a full, I think it's a 4-month audit. That's when we need, yes, a 4-month audit. So that would require some reprioritizing of ones you have already approved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions for Chris?
Not for
Representative
Chris, for
Barker.
Justin.
Okay, Justin.
If that's permissible.
Yeah, sure.
Was this audit not taken up in April when we always pick all of our audits? This is just something that came out after that?
Yeah, that's correct. So per Chris's history, at one time we even had this approved on the schedule. It was bumped by the committee or taken off our schedule to make way for something. It was then put on the April meeting agenda, but along with the other 25 some requests, and was not reselected at that meeting, so it came off.
That was I remember hearing this, and I remember it got bumped, and then it was back in the bin, and then in April, when we considered all the audits, this was not a priority audit. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, yes. Representative Carter, I do have a question for you as you talk a little bit about this and why you're bringing it back. My question to you is, have you had any requests from constituents or others that have kind of led you down to this road that this might be a priority item?
Madam Chair, I have from some of the board members of the State Board, Fair Board. They are new board members or board member, let me put it that way. And the reason, Madam Chair, I wanted to bring it back up for the committees at least to take a look at this audit is I sat on Ag and Natural Resources Budget Committee, and we have this budget, the State Fair budget. And there's been numerous questions in the past on funding levels, what's not funded. It's a real mess down there. And then we had an executive director leave midstream. We had an interim director appointed. Senator Berger took over, if I remember correctly, as interim. And now they have a full-time CEO overseeing the State Fair. To me, it just sort of made sense. Now would be a great time to do a full-blown audit so we can go back and the new CEO will have adequate, up-to-date data on what's transpired in the past and hopefully make it better going forward if there's any discrepancies. So, Madam Chair, that's why I thought now would be the time, maybe the proper time to bring this audit back up in front of the committee.
Representative Gardner, so you've had some discussion with board members, and I think that's really good, because that's one of the things that I asked legislative post-audit, if before we took a look at this, whether it would be limited scope, because I think it's possible to narrow it down and maybe make a place for it, or whether or not we were to approve it and bump something else, because it would bump something else. So I would just caution the committee that if we are going to approve it, that we then suggest which item, which other priority that we already voted on are we going to set aside? So for you, my question is, did they say, I mean, are there annual financial accounting audits that they have to do anyway?
Madam Chair, I believe, I'm not positive, I believe because I believe they do have an audit. But now that I'm trying to think back, I've never seen the audit, a copy of the audit when we take a look at their budget every year. So I'm going to say I'm not sure. I would think they do have an audit, but they're you know, it's just they've changed directors, CEOs over the last few years, so I'm just not sure. I think it's just I'm just following along from my history of overlooking their budget, and there are numerous problems that I have seen.
Okay, would you be amenable to the possibility that rather than have two questions, focus on the first question and actually work with, perhaps you could work with Mr. Berger, former Senator Berger, and find out what the issues are, the concerns are, and then that could help shape a potential question for a limited scope audit. The reason I suggest that is because, you know, I think I asked Chris earlier this week, how much do we spend in sales tax? And she said over 300 and some $1,000, so not a huge number. We only spend about 1 million in state general fund money, which we know compared to other states is very dismally small. And so I don't know that we need number two answered immediately because we already know we're at the bottom. We are not funding our state fair very highly. And considering the other priorities that have already been selected, I'm wondering if we could get a written, not a testimony to the committee, but just a written response from, for example, the executive director or from the board member of anything that they would want reviewed in order for us to get a better understanding of where is this chaos coming from and why is the CEO not able to, you know, as a paid employee, put this together, put all the eggs back in the basket and get things organized.
I understand, Madam Chair, and that's the whole point. This CEO is new. He's just taken over. So I'm not sure he even knows at this point where any of the, what the problems are because he hasn't been on board that long. But I can do that. Why don't, I'll just withdraw this today and we'll take another, I'll do some visiting with folks and either come back with a limited scope audit or we'll address it next April.
Okay, and the other option is also to bring it back as a whole option in April, or you could just bring it back. Which would you prefer? Just withdraw? Okay, so the request has been withdrawn, so that will give Representative Gardner an option to either bring it back before us and request it to be added to the spring list of possible audits, or you could bring it back to us for a limited scope audit where you could get some little more information. Any questions from the committee about that? All right, well, thank you, Representative. From that, we'll move on. I'll recognize Justin to explain the budget.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. If you turn to tab B in your committee notebooks, you'll have a memo from me. I'm sorry I neglected to send this out in the pre-meeting mailing, so you got this a few days ago. A little short notice. Fortunately, it's pretty simple. As you'll see in this memo, this is pretty standard fare. Kind of the good news is that our revised fiscal year 2022 budget is within our appropriation and allows us to fully staff our agency. So we received about $3.7 million in total appropriations for fiscal year 2022. Based on our revised budget, we have everything we need and a surplus actually of $171,000. So that will be lapsed back to the state general fund, which is common for the legislative agencies. When we have more than we need in our budgets, we take that top off and just put it back. Our 2023 budget of $3.5 million is almost identical to our 2022 revised budget. It also allows us to fully staff our agency. It's just slightly below our current year because we always include less money for contractors in the out year, and then unspent monies would go forward and help fill that bucket in the future. So it's kind of a mechanism we have just to make sure that we can keep our contractor buckets full without having too much in any given revised year. So you'll see on the table in the back just kind of provides a high-level summary of our expenditures and our fiscal year 22 revision and our 2023 request. Just a reminder, this budget has been in front of the Post-Audit Executive Committee. You all will need to review and approve it today or modify and approve it today. It will then need to go to the LCC. It will then need to go to the various Senate and House budget committees during the session. So our budget has multiple stages. One of the reasons we put this meeting in October, and I know it's kind of short, was to get this budget through you so that it can be available for the LCC at their next meeting when they take up legislative budgets, which is usually in mid to late October or early November. So, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any committee member questions on the budget.
All right, committee. Yes, Representative Rose.
Yes, sir, Representative Burrows. So actually what we realized there is for quite some time, we've had some contractual services actually placed in our capital outlay. And actually, to get technical, it's because we were purchasing a lot of software licenses back in the day when you would actually buy the software and put it on your shelf. And then, of course, we've actually, in modern era, moved to a subscription-based service, which is really more of a contractual service. So it's just cleaning up our accounting codes. So that money actually moves up into the contractual service. As you can imagine, we don't have much actual capital outlay. We don't have a lot of office improvements or equipment. So just a recategorization to make sure the accounting codes are more reflective of their expenditures.
Yes, Representative. All right, their motion has been made by Representative Burrows and seconded by Senator Olson. Any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting the budget, say aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, Justin, the next is proposed legislation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this is in tab C of your committee notebook. So this is actually a request from the Vice Chair, Senator Tyson. What this bill is pretty simple conceptually, and Tamara will be working on creating the actual bill draft for the committee members, but we wanted to bring it to you quickly because the session is coming up right around the corner. The idea here is simple. There is a limiting clause in the Post-Audit Act that significantly limits what we can audit when it comes to entities regulated by the Kansas Corporation Commission. So this is not true of other entities regulated by state government agency. If you have a daycare center that's being regulated by Department of Health and Environment or Department of Disability Services, DCF, or whichever agency does that these days, we have the audit authority to go look at whatever that regulatory agency can look at. When it comes to the KCC, it actually, up until 2004, we were prohibited from looking at them at all. So these would be the energy and utility companies. In 2004, the post auditor at the time, I don't know if any of you recall, Barb Hinton, had come to the post audit committee into the legislature and try to remove that limitation. What they got was a very narrow door, kind of sliver of a door that said, well, you can audit them, but only in terms of their compliance with state laws and regulations, and a few other very specific things in state statute. So the proposal here would be for the post-audit committee to simply strike that limitation, which would allow us then to audit those entities in the same way that we can audit any other regulated entity, which isn't everything, it's whatever the governing body is able to look at and review. We as your auditors then could look at and review. So I've talked with Tamara a little bit in terms of the committee's options because we don't have the bill language in front of you. You could either approve it conceptually and then work through the chair to distribute the actual draft language to the members of the committee and get that approved however she sees fit. Or you could wait simply to make the decision to approve that until we get the actual bill draft language in front of you. But with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Justin, how many other states have this authority, post-audit, to have the ability to go to their regulatory commission and audit those entities? Do you know?
I do not know, Representative Gardner, how many other audit offices share our power or whether any have this specific limitation.
Could you find out?
I will try.
For us, please. And then just a follow-up. Senator Thompson, I think, said earlier something about an audit with gas prices coming down, maybe the pike. Would this bill have to be approved, I assume, before that audit could take place, correct?
It depends on the subject matter of any request. So there's a lot of ways you can target an audit request, and that depends significantly on whether we're talking Evergy or some of the major ones under the KCC's purview. But that's correct. For us to look at any entity regulated by the Kansas Corporation Commission in any substantive way, I mean, we have a few little things, but probably not of interest to the legislature, this would have to be removed.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair, your
Yes.
Vice Chair does have her hand up
Yes,
online.
yes, Senator Tyson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I would like to comment to Representative Gardner's question also. The request, if I read Senator Thompson's mind correctly, he is requesting an audit that would not require this language to be passed at this time, or considering that type of audit. But I do think that this, Madam Chair, I am going to make a motion for a bill draft to be requested so that we can start this, as we do in other committees, start the process on the draft legislation. And then the committee would be able to have that language in front of them the next time we meet, or as Justin said, that we could have it emailed to the committee also so that we could continue work on it. What happened is I was looking into the possibility of a request and came across this language that we were prohibited. And it just makes sense that we are able to have access to audit any of the departments or agencies that are governed by the legislature. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I would second that motion, Madam
All
Chair.
right, we have a motion and second. And for further discussion, I am going to ask Justin or Senator Tyson or Senator Thompson, you can't answer. We do have a draft where it just highlights the portion that we would remove. Is that correct from statute?
That's just staff's attempt to draw your attention to it. That is not the reviser's bill
So
draft.
there may need to be more revisions. Okay. And other questions? Did Senator Ware?
Thank you, Madam. This, not a question exactly, but in the effort for transparency, this looks like an obvious thing to do. Seems to me, even without our problems last winter. This is a great thing. I think KCC could use some oversight. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Senator. Representative.
Just for clarification, we're just authorizing the reviser's office to draft a bill, and then before the bill would be approved, we would have another motion to approve that to send to the legislature.
That is how I understand it. Is that correct, Senator?
Yes, that is my motion, just a bill request for a
Okay.
draft.
And Representative Gardner.
Thanks, Madam Chair, just one follow-up. This would allow the LPA to audit entities that are under the KCC's control or that are regulated, correct? I mean, it's just not regulating the KC or auditing the KCC. It would allow you to go out and audit anybody that's regulated by the KCC, correct?
That is correct. We can already audit the Kansas Corporation Commission. We cannot audit the entities that they regulate, or at least in only very limited ways.
Senator Olson.
Justin, what other companies right now can we audit that we have access to, besides the ones out to KCC? I mean, in other ways, what other private companies?
So So what it says is we can audit any person who is regulated or licensed by any state agency or who operates or functions for the benefit of any state institution. So again, that would be, it could be childcare facilities, it could be, you know,
Oil and gas company, I mean, I could say, you know, X oil and gas company, I want them audited, and you could go out and then audit them, or an
If they
independent.
were regulated-
Or AT&T, or, I guess, I don't know if they're, whoever's regulated, the KCC's, you know, has oversight. I want AAA tow company audited, because they're regulated, because they're licensed through the KCC. I mean, you know, wow, this is pretty expansive. Thank you.
Representative Burrows. Just note to the committee that it does have to be approved by a majority of this board that is represented by both Republicans and Democrats. And so by just allowing it, it may provide something in the future that would be very relevant and transparent. It shouldn't be something that we fear, and it would be up to this committee if we wanted to expand the budget and expand the, you know, the professionals that work within this. So it doesn't, it's simply, this motion is to look at providing the statute, the bill option for this committee, and then we would have the opportunity to review it. So we have Representative Olson, Senator Olson and Senator Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. This is just really expansive. So, I mean, I see the next step, then we go over to the, you know, Securities Commission, we go to the Secretary of State, and we start auditing every business in the state. I think there was wisdom in their decision before. I can't support this. I mean, I think you know, this is way too big carte blanche to power to give, you know, and then this group starts saying, I want to audit my company or any other company in the state, and that's not receiving any public funds or anything. I can't do that.
Senator Thompson.
Yeah, I think this is, you know, we're asking for a bill draft. And once again, this committee can determine whether or not any audits are going to be necessary or appropriate. So I don't think that it's going to turn into a weaponized type situation. I think for extraordinary situations like what we had happen last February, where there was obviously speculation in gas prices where the Kansans are going to be on the hook for $1 billion of extraordinary gas prices over 5 days. If it takes something like that to get to the bottom of that situation, where we've asked the KCC to do it and they've sort of punted, then we need some additional tools to be able to look at that. FERC is looking at it right now, but that's at a federal level. And so just asking for the bill draft and then going through the committee process to see whether or not this is necessary, I think it's a good step. And if it fails, then it fails. But it's a good opportunity to look at whether or not we can audit some of these extraordinary situations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I just ask, with your permission, of course, if when we get this bill, if we decide to do a bill draft, when that's circulated, could we circulate maybe to the committee, this would certainly be helpful for me, a list of every entity that the KCC regulates, just so we can all kind of fully understand the scope of what we would be approving. I certainly don't claim to know everything that KCC has jurisdiction over, so maybe if we could get that circulated so we could all just kind of have that common understanding if we do proceed with the bill draft. Thank you.
Justin, would that be possible? Yes, that would be possible. Great. All right, there is, yes, Senator, one more time, Olson.
Sorry for the third bite. I really think this bill's just an overreach, and I think if you want to trust me, I hate what happened with the natural gas situation, but I think if you want to resolve that, you might have to resolve the people that shorted gas.
All right, thank you, Senator. With that, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor of Senator Tyson's motion to go ahead and secure a bill draft for the regulation of the ability to regulate anybody that's regulated by the KCC, say aye. And those opposed? All right, we're going to have to do by the hand, so all those in favor, say aye, but actually right hand. So Senator Tyson, are you in favor of your own motion?
Yes, thank you.
All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are in favor. Did I count that correct? And those opposed by the same sign? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the motion fails because there is not a majority. So Senator Tyson and Senator Thompson, you can thus take that onward as you see appropriate. Yes,
We will,
Representative
if I-
Burrows. Yes, one moment, and then I'll let you respond. Representative Burrows.
We can't hear him. He's not using his microphone.
He is grabbing it right now.
Sorry, Madam Senator. Representative Burrows. We have utility committees in both chambers, and I would assume that they would be the best to handle this issue and come forward with a recommendation and/or the guidance necessary to provide the post-audit with what steps we could take or what bill drafts to put into play. They deal directly with those entities throughout the year, and I would just suggest that we strongly look at talking to our utility chairs to see what action we may want to take this next session.
Senator Tyson, would you like to
Thank you,
respond?
Madam. Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And one of the the utility chairs is on this committee and seconded the motion. So it's disappointing that post-audit committee would not see a need for the transparency, especially after what happened with the February price increases. And we just want to get to the bottom of what happened and to protect Kansans. So thank you, Madam Chair, for entertaining the motion.
All right, thank you, Senator Tyson. All right, committee, we're going to move on to our next item. We have the consent calendar items. Am I on the right spot, Chris? All right, so consent items, I will recognize Chris, and she'll explain the content.
Yes, it's pretty straightforward today. It's just the draft minutes from the committee's August 30th meeting and acceptance of the completed performance audit today, the K-12 security survey.
If there is no one that would like to abstain, and if there's no objections with any of the items that are included in the consent calendar, then we will consider them automatically approved. All right, very good. With that, Senator Tyson, would you like to make the motion to go into executive session?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move to recess this open meeting for a closed meeting pursuant to KSA 75-4319A to discuss matters relating to security measures that protect the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission and the information systems of the state agencies that were audited in the 2020 under the justification listed in KSA 75-4319 B12C. Because discussion of such matters in an open meeting would jeopardize such security measures, to resume the open meeting in the room at, Madam Chair, I did not get the time certain. And to record this motion if adopted as part of the committee's permanent records.
Okay, 11:35, what is it?
11:38.
11:38.
I will
11:38.
amend my motion to 11:38 a.m. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor, say aye. And those opposed, none. All right, the motion carries. We will go into executive session for a period of 25 minutes.
Madam Chair, I also just need to mention on the record that for the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission, we have Don Brownlee, Todd Allen, Dennis Bachman, Sean Globitz, and Jeff Maxon from OITS. They'll be in that session. There will be no outside attendees for the 2020 IT security follow-up.
All right, Legislative Post Audit Committee, we are returning from Executive Committee in which no formal action was taken. And Justin, I will turn it over to you for additional items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So only one additional item. You all should have received email from me or communication from me that I am announcing that I will be leaving Legislative Post Audit in the next few months. So we will be, first and foremost, it's been really fun working with all of you. It's really been enjoyable. I will be working with the chair to set up our next meeting in December, where you will have to name, at a minimum, my interim successor, so that we have to transfer my powers to someone so that we can keep paying the bills and keep the lights on and keep auditing state government. I'm actually going to, I hope to talk to each of you individually on some of my thoughts on my successor and kind of how I'd like to see that go. Of course, that'll be ultimately the committee's decision. State law gives you all that power to make that appointment. So that's kind of the big thing. I do leave you in great confidence that you guys have a great staff here, so I have no worries about that, and I'm sure they will carry you far into the future. So with that, it's been fun. It's been a privilege, and I'm going to be going to Washington State to work for my former boss, Scott Frank. I've received several offers from that state over the years, and my wife finally told me I was taking it, so I did. It's been a pleasure.
It's a beautiful state, and you are going to be missed, but we are very grateful that you have left us a great team. And so we're excited about that. Yes, Representative Burrows.
Madam Chair, I would ask that he use the microphone.
Thank you, Senator.
My apologies, Senator. Representative Burrows. Justin, thank you. And in my 18 years serving on this committee, we have been blessed with 3 great lead auditors. And I would just state that your predecessor, Scott Frank, and Barb Hinton have continued to provide quality services, as not only recognized by the legislative body here in Topeka, but nationally with the awards that your committee has received. So I just want to say thank you, wish you the best. And I believe, did Scott Frank follow Barb? And now you're following Scott? So committee, we may want to look at our rules. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like Representative Burrows, I've seen many of them come and go, and we got to stop this Washington deal. No more to Washington, but I'll definitely be sad to see you go, as I was chair when you were, appointed assistant and then or deputy and then secretary. So, yeah, I'm going to hate to see you go, Justin, but we got to do something about this Washington deal. So, any of you on the staff that like Washington, stop.
Senator Olson, do you remember what year that was?
Oh, gosh. No, it's probably been about, what, 4 years ago? Yep, 2018.
Okay, 2018.
Yep.
All right.
Time goes quick, and we're really blessed with great, LPA staff and directors, so let's keep it up. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, then in December, we'll talk more about it, and we'll all get to say our final goodbyes and send you on your merry way. Anything else?
We're going to have a party, right?
I always like that, so yeah, we'll do something. All right, so any other items, committee members? If not, then, and Justin, we're good? All right, so with that, committee, we are adjourned.